"Freeze, kid." A heavy hand landed on Maya Jenkins's shoulder. It wasn't a casual touch. It was a cold iron grip. Mike, the burly security guard for Sterling Legacy Bank, growled as if he were apprehending a common thief. The entire gleaming bank lobby fell silent. Heads turned to stare at the slender black girl in a simple gray hoodie. Maya stood there, small between the marble countertop and the crystal chandeliers, but her eyes were strangely bright. Arthur Vance, the branch manager, stood at a distance with his arms crossed. He nodded slowly, his lips curling into a smirk. "See? I told you. Trouble." He wasn't talking to Maya. He was talking about her, as if she were nothing more than a smudge on the polished marble floor. Maya looked up. Her eyes didn't waver. No fear, no anger, just an unnerving stillness. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Vance?" Her voice rang out, clear and firm. Arthur let out a low chuckle, the kind a man makes when he's used to winning. "Oh, I'm sure, little girl. I'm absolutely sure," but he didn't know one thing. The trap in this room wasn't for Maya Jenkins. It was set for him, and right now, he was walking straight into it, without a shred of doubt. 3 months earlier, the Jenkins family dining room, small but cozy, was bathed in a soft yellow light. A roast chicken sat steaming on the table, but Robert Jenkins, the new CEO of Sterling Legacy Bank, was just pushing food around his plate. He couldn't stomach it. On her father's face, Maya saw new lines of exhaustion, deeper than the financial reports stacked in his leather briefcase. "I'm not worried about profits," Robert said, his voice hoarse. "I'm worried about these letters." He pulled a stack of papers from his suit jacket. Letters, old and new, written in shaky handwriting or crudely printed. They all shared one thing: complaints. Black customers, Hispanic customers, and even recent immigrants with perfectly legal documents. They wrote about being stared at, aggressively questioned, and treated like criminals when all they wanted to do was deposit a paycheck or open a savings account. "They see us as thieves, Maya," Robert sighed, his hand trembling slightly as he folded the letters. "In the very bank I'm supposed to be running." It wasn't a complaint. It was a confession. Maya rested her chin on her hand, watching her father in silence. She had never seen him like this. Robert Jenkins was a man who stood before thousands of employees and spoke of vision and legacy. But here, in this small room, he was just a father, exhausted by an ugly truth. "You need proof," Maya said softly. "Proof they can't deny, something they can't just brush off as a misunderstanding." Robert looked up, his eyes filled with surprise. "Proof? What do you mean?" "I'll go. I'll be the test. They'll never suspect a kid. That's my advantage." He nearly shot out of his chair. "Absolutely not. Maya, you're 14. I won't let you face that. That poison." But Maya remained silent, and in that silence was a weight Robert couldn't dismiss. She wasn't being reckless. She was a mirror, reflecting what he was afraid to confront. She had a gift that even he sometimes found strange: the ability to see people for who they really were when they thought no one was watching. Since she was little, Maya had a habit of sitting in a corner, observing glances, gestures, and hesitant pauses. She could see the truth hidden behind every smile. Robert clenched his jaw. He had 100 reasons to forbid her, but only one reason he couldn't. Maya was right. And in her eyes, he saw a resolve far beyond her years. Arthur Vance. The name was a crack in the bank's pristine legacy. Maya did her research. Arthur's portrait hung in the downtown Manhattan branch, slicked back hair, a perfectly tailored Italian suit, a smile as thin as a knife's edge. His office had no degrees on the wall, no awards, just black and white photos of his great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father, all white men in suits with stiff smiles. The Vance family had served this bank for 4 generations. To Arthur, the bank wasn't a community institution. It was an exclusive club, and he was the gatekeeper. Anyone who didn't fit the standard had to stay out. Back to the present. Maya stood at the marble counter and slid the check across the glass. "I need to open a premium account." Arthur picked up the check with 2 fingers as if it were garbage. 50,000? He scanned Maya from head to toe. "Honey, maybe you should try the community branch in your neighborhood. We handle more serious transactions here." A whisper came from the side. Mrs. Covington, with her cloud of silver hair and an expensive Hermes bag, murmured to her friend, "I can't believe it. They're crawling their way in here now." Maya didn't look down. I know exactly where I am. This check is real. You can verify it. That calmness was like a needle pricking Arthur's ego. A black kid in this situation was supposed to be scared, to stammer. But not this one. What game are you playing, little girl? Arthur growled, leaning over the counter. Bank fraud is a federal crime. Do you want to spend the rest of your childhood in juvie? Maya subtly turned her wrist. The smartwatch screen flickered. No one noticed, but it was recording everything. Every slur, every smirk. It wasn't just a watch. It was a silent witness. It's an early birthday present from my father, Maya replied, her voice steady. His name is Robert Jenkins. Arthur froze for half a second. The name was as heavy as lead, but then he burst out laughing, trying to drown out his unease. Oh, of course. And I'm the president's cousin. Mike, hold her here. I'm calling the cops. Maya didn't flinch. Her mind flashed to the other kids. The ones without a CEO for a father, without a secret recording device. The ones who had walked away from this place in shame. She knew this fight wasn't just for her. As Arthur picked up the phone, Maya wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking of all the other kids who had been drowned in silence. This was a fight for all of them. If you've ever been judged just for how you look, hit that like button to let Maya know she's not alone. And make sure you subscribe, because justice is just getting started. Arthur thought he had won. But the $50,000 check was just the bait. The real trap was far more sophisticated, and it was about to snap shut. The air in Sterling Legacy Bank had grown thick, like fog. People weren't whispering anymore. They didn't dare breathe too loudly. Light from the crystal chandelier glittered overhead, but no one found it beautiful. It only highlighted the pale faces of the employees behind the counter. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed not from customers, but from two police officers who had just walked in. Officer Miller led the way, broad-shouldered with a slight paunch and neatly cut salt and pepper hair. He had the look of a man who had seen enough of the city's problems. Petty criminals, drunks, fights that left nothing behind but paperwork. His eyes were tired, but they held a hint of familiarity as he looked at Arthur Vance. Officer Chen followed, her posture straight, her steps measured. Her face was a cool, emotionless mask. Her dark eyes glinted with caution, as if she were scanning every detail. If Miller was a man who trusted old habits, Chen was a woman who trusted procedure. Arthur let out a breath of relief, his arrogant smile widening. He pointed directly at Maya. Another one of them, Dave. This kid tried to pass a fake $50,000 check. I told you trouble, Miller frowned. He wasn't exactly surprised. It seemed to fit the picture he was used to. Chen remained silent. She looked at Maya, her gaze a thin blade, not lingering but sharp enough to take everything in. Maya felt dozens of eyes on her, not just Arthur's or Miller's, but those of complete strangers. They looked at her as if her very presence in this marble room was a mistake. Her heart was pounding, but her breathing was even. Don't let them see you shake. If you have to tremble, tremble on the inside, not with your eyes. Chen stepped forward. Do you have any ID? Maya gave a slight nod and opened her bag. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. She placed her student ID and passport on the counter. Here, the check is real. Miller picked up the check, glancing at it like it was a flyer. He sighed, then stuffed it in his pocket. Listen, kid, it's best if you just tell the truth. Where did you get this? Maya raised her head. From my father. Robert Jenkins. The name fell to the floor like a heavy stone. A moment of silence. Then Arthur burst out laughing, a dry, cracking sound. You hear that? She just keeps repeating the same lie. Like a broken record, Chen still said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on Maya's face. It wasn't a look of pity, nor was it one of outright suspicion. It was a question mark, growing larger by the second. Arthur jutted his chin out. Verify it. You'll see I'm right. I'm always right. Miller raised his radio, his voice flat. Dispatch, this is 2 Adam 43. Run a verification on a check. Signed by a Robert Jenkins. Headed for the Midtown branch. He turned back to Maya. While we wait, you're coming with us. We'll talk at the station. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Customers whispered. A few raised their phones to record. Mrs. Covington clapped softly, her smile elegant but laced with venom. Well done, Arthur. People like this need to be put in their place. Mike stepped forward, plastic cuffs in hand. The soft click-clack sounded loud and sharp, like an insect tearing through a leaf in the dead of night. The light from the chandelier reflected off the clear plastic, casting a shimmer on Maya's face. She didn't move. Every muscle in her body seemed frozen, but her eyes were not. She looked straight at Arthur, her dark eyes deep and strangely still. It wasn't the gaze of someone afraid. It was like the surface of a winter lake, silent but hiding an immense power beneath. Arthur felt a sudden jolt. An unexpected chill ran down his spine, making him shiver. Just as the cuffs were about to close around Maya's wrist, a voice cut through the air. "Don't do it." The voice wasn't loud, but it was crisp and sharp. It wasn't advice, nor was it a plea. It was a command, an order that shot straight into the ears of everyone in the lobby. The room seemed to tilt. Every eye snapped to the entrance, but the glass doors only reflected the glittering chandelier, shimmering like the surface of a pond. No one was there, Arthur frowned, trying to regain his authority. "Who's there?" The voice came again, clearer and more decisive this time. It was coming from the radio on Officer Miller's chest. "Officer Miller, I repeat. Do not touch that girl." "That is a direct order from the commissioner's office." Miller froze. His hand was still in the air, suspended in motion like an unfinished statue. His face contorted, his eyes wide with a shock greater than anyone else's in the room. Chen's mouth fell open, her eyes lighting up not with fear, but with utter astonishment. A thick silence descended on the lobby. People think of silence as the absence of sound, but this silence had weight, as if the whole room were being crushed. You could hear heartbeats, the sound of someone swallowing, even the soft click as someone unconsciously hit record on their phone. Arthur's mouth hung open, his throat dry. "What? What the hell?" The radio crackled again, the authoritative voice repeating, each word seeming to carve itself into the air. "Maintain the scene. No transport. Await further instruction." Mrs. Covington stumbled back, the heel of her shoe making a small clack on the marble floor. She clutched her Hermes bag as if it could shield her crumbling composure. Her face was a mess of wrinkles, the red lipstick on her lips suddenly looking garish. Mike flinched, his hands trembling. He quickly hid the cuffs behind his back, like someone caught doing something wrong. A young teller covered her mouth, her eyes wide, fixed on Maya. Her look was no longer one of contempt but of fear mixed with curiosity. "Who is this girl?" Chen stepped forward, her voice low but clear, her eyes no longer cold. Who are you?" The question echoed, speaking for everyone present in the lobby. Maya stood still. Then, for the first time that day, the corner of her mouth lifted. A small, cold smile, glittering like the edge of a steel blade. She didn't look at Chen. Instead, her eyes bored straight into Arthur. "The game is over. Mr. Vance, it's time for the adults to step in." Her tone was calm, but to Arthur's ears it sounded like a death sentence. He was stunned. His chin trembled. The arrogant smirk that had been etched on his face for so long suddenly vanished, leaving behind a rare, naked vulnerability. He felt like a trapped animal, thrashing in the very snare he thought he had set for someone else. Miller blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Chen stood tall, her gaze shifting to one of keen, watchful curiosity. Mrs. Covington slumped into a nearby chair, speechless. The entire bank felt as if it had been turned upside down. The weak had become the center of power. The powerful had become the accused. And right at that moment, the glass doors of the bank swung open again. This time the sound wasn't solitary but a barrage. The steady, forceful beat of shoes echoed through the lobby. Camera flashes erupted, brighter than the chandelier. People squinted, shielding their eyes. It wasn't just one person who walked in. A flood of figures poured in. Sharp suits, files, camera lenses, and the blinding lights of reporters. Each footstep was like another nail being hammered into Arthur Vance's coffin. Customers scattered, some immediately covering their faces, not wanting to be caught on camera. Mike leaned to one side, trying to make himself small. Chen and Miller stood frozen, unable to react. Arthur was pale, his lips moving but no words coming out. Meanwhile, Maya stood still, only adjusting the strap of her bag. She didn't need to say another word. Her smile was enough to signal it. The real storm had just begun. No one in the lobby dared to breathe too loudly. After the barrage of footsteps and blinding camera flashes, the name Maya had mentioned from the beginning now appeared in the flesh. Robert Jenkins. He was no longer the weary father at a quiet dinner 3 months ago. Before everyone, he was the CEO of Sterling Legacy Bank. Tall, dressed in a flawless black suit, his eyes as sharp as a razor. Flanking him was Margaret Holloway, the head of HR. Her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her face as cold as ice, a tablet in her hand. David Cho, the head of legal, walked beside her clutching a thick leather briefcase, and behind them, camera flashes from reporters swept across the lobby brighter than any chandelier. Robert stopped in the middle of the room. His voice, not loud but deep and heavy as a verdict, rang out. "Good afternoon, Arthur. I believe you're holding my daughter? That sound turned everyone to stone. Just moments ago, no one in the lobby had believed Maya's claim to be the CEO's daughter. They had smirked, whispered, turned away. But now, the most powerful man in this bank was publicly confirming it. The truth was exposed like fire thrown into a barrel of oil. Arthur Vance was adrift, his face ashen. He had heard the name from Maya's lips, but he had laughed it off. To him, it was just the absurd lie of a black kid who dared to wander into his club. But now that lie was standing tall right in front of him, delivering a stinging slap across his face. Mr. Jenkins? Your daughter. His voice broke, trembling like a snapped string. Robert didn't answer right away. He just looked at him, his eyes holding the cold fury of a father who had seen everything. Arthur stammered, his lips twisting. It's just a misunderstanding. You have to understand. We were just following security protocol. Margaret Holloway took a step forward, cutting him off. Her voice fell like a thin blade. Protocol. Her finger tapped the screen. A video recording played, the audio echoing through the lobby. Trouble. This kid is just a nuisance. Call the cops. It was Arthur's voice, clear, disdainful. His smirk-filled laughter echoed, followed by the part where he mocked the very name of the CEO, the man standing right here. Every sound that came out was like an arrow piercing Arthur's chest. He went limp, his feet feeling nailed to the floor. Around him, customers were stunned. An old man shook his head slowly, muttering, "Unbelievable." Mrs. Covington was trembling, her hands wrapped tightly around her Hermes bag, her face drained of all color. Arthur cried out, desperately clinging to a last hope. "No, it's edited. You're framing me." Margaret raised an eyebrow, her voice still even but like a hammer striking metal. So this laugh was edited too? The sound of his condescending chuckle echoed again. Arthur took a half-step back as if the sound itself were choking him. Maya stepped forward. Her voice was clear, chillingly calm. But that's not all. She played another video. On the screen appeared Emily, Maya's best friend, white, the same age. At this very counter just yesterday, Emily presented a check for $40,000. In the video, Arthur was smiling, leaning forward warmly. "Hello there, miss. Let me take care of that for you. Would you like a glass of orange juice while you wait?" Everything went smoothly, warmly, with no sign of security or police. The video cut out. Silence blanketed the room, thick as smoke. Maya looked up. Her voice rang out loud and clear. "What's the only difference between me and Emily, Mr. Vance? Is it the color of our skin?" The question landed like a sledgehammer. A few customers gasped, their faces flushing with shame. A female teller looked down, unable to meet Maya's gaze. No one could answer. Arthur broke, losing all control, screaming, "This is a setup!
You all set me up!"
This little brat! Who do you think you are to do this to me?" Maya stood still. Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't look away. They just burned with the bright light of a flame. Robert stepped forward, shielding his daughter, his voice low and rumbling like summer thunder. "She is my daughter, and I am going to clean this bank." He turned to David Cho, giving a short command. "David, begin." David Cho opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. He adjusted his glasses. Then his voice rang out loud and clear, each word like a nail being driven into the air. "Arthur Vance, you are suspended, effective immediately. A federal investigation into systemic discriminatory practices will be initiated. Mrs. Covington, your comments have been recorded. Your accounts at Sterling Legacy will be closed. Mike, you are terminated for carrying out an illegal order." The proclamation was like a series of hammer blows. Mike turned pale, looking down, his hands trembling. Mrs. Covington let out a small shriek, then sank into a chair, clutching her bag. The reporters swarmed, camera flashes flickering non-stop, as if trying to capture every drop of sweat on Arthur's forehead. Arthur collapsed into a chair, his body seeming to deflate. His voice was lost like a child's. "My legacy, my family." Maya stepped forward. Her eyes were blazing now, not with cold composure but with the heat of justice. A legacy built on hate was always going to fall. Arthur trembled, looking up, his lips quivering. "What mistake?" Maya replied, each word as clear as if etched in stone. "Your mistake was thinking I was alone." The Sterling Legacy bank lobby was still suffocating, as if all the air had been sucked out. All eyes were on Arthur Vance, once so arrogant, now huddled like a convicted criminal. Wherever the camera lights landed, his face looked paler, more tremulous. Arthur couldn't believe it. His entire life, his whole family line had served this bank. His great-grandfather, His grandfather and his father had all held powerful positions in this very building. His father's portrait still hung imposingly on the wall, looking down like a guardian deity. Arthur grew up on the words, "Protect the legacy, keep the bank pure." He had believed in it like he believed in the sun rising every morning. But now, in a single afternoon, it all came crashing down. Robert Jenkins stepped forward, standing tall, his broad shoulders shielding his daughter. He was no longer the weary father in the kitchen 3 months ago. He was the CEO of Sterling Legacy Bank, his eyes sharp, his voice deep and resonant. "Record everything. Let the world see the truth. Discrimination isn't some monster from far away. It wears a suit, smiles politely, and sits right beside us." The camera panned slowly, capturing every face. A few customers looked down, avoiding the lens. Mrs. Covington, who had applauded Arthur, now clutched her Hermes bag as if to hide her face. And Maya, she stood silently, her dark, deep eyes unflinching. Arthur jumped up, screaming hoarsely, "This is a setup. You all set me up. This girl, she tricked me!" Maya replied, her voice calm but heavy as lead. "No, Mr. Vance, you exposed yourself. I was just the mirror." The entire lobby fell silent. Her words were like a cold blade, forcing everyone to look at themselves. Who had smirked when Arthur mocked Maya? Who had stayed silent? Suddenly, they were ashamed. David Cho, the head of legal, opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. He spread the papers on the counter, each one like a stone blocking any retreat. Buried complaint reports, customer files rejected for vague reasons, all bearing Arthur's signature. Margaret Holloway turned on her tablet. A man's raspy voice filled the air, heavy and foul. "Listen, Arthur. Sterling Legacy isn't for everyone. You have to keep the bank's bloodline pure. Filter out the undesirable elements. That's how your father did it, how your grandfather did it. That is our legacy." The sound echoed as if from a tomb. Robert closed his eyes, his heart heavy. He recognized that voice. Arthur Vance Sr., the bank's former executive vice president, praised as a legend, whose portrait hung so formally on the wall. Arthur Jr. began to shake violently, shouting, "Stop! Don't play that! He's my father. He is the legacy." But it was too late. Everyone had heard. The legacy Arthur fought so hard to protect wasn't honor. It wasn't value. It was just a prejudice passed down through generations, cloaked in the formal robes of tradition. Maya looked up at the portrait. The man in the picture wore a three-piece suit, his gaze authoritative. But under the camera lights, the portrait seemed to warp, sneering at the entire room. She whispered, her voice just loud enough for all to hear. "You're mistaken, Mr. Vance. A legacy isn't what you inherit from your father. It's what you leave behind for others. And your legacy is just ashes." Arthur collapsed, a sob tearing from his throat, choked and bitter. He wasn't crying out of remorse, but because he had lost the very foundation he had built his entire life on. Robert stepped forward. He didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled out his wallet, an intensely personal act in this public theater. He took out a photo with worn corners. He didn't hold it up for the cameras. He placed it gently on the counter, right in front of Arthur. In the photo, a younger Robert was embracing a beautiful black woman, both of them beaming, holding a baby girl in their arms. It was Maya. Arthur froze. His eyes were glued to the picture. He looked at the woman in the photo, then up at Maya, then back at Robert. Finally, he understood. He hadn't just insulted a customer. He had tried to filter out the CEO's own family, a family that he, in his narrow-minded world, could never have imagined. Robert's voice rang through the lobby, each word like an oath. "This is Maya Jenkins, my daughter. Today she proved one thing. Justice doesn't wait until we're ready. Justice comes when someone dares to stand up." Arthur trembled at the words. He looked back at his father's portrait. The authoritative face seemed to melt, turning into a stain. He realized his whole life had been spent as the keeper of a hateful legacy. A legacy not carved in stone, but etched in cruel treatment. Mike, the large security guard who had first put a hand on Maya's shoulder, quietly walked forward. He didn't look at Robert or Arthur. He looked directly at Maya and gave a short, deep nod. A silent apology, more powerful than any words. Maya turned her back and walked away beside her father. She didn't look back. The fire had been lit, and that fire would continue to burn, consuming the prejudices that remained. Arthur Vance thought he was protecting a legacy, but in truth he was clinging to the ghost of prejudice and hatred. Maya and Robert showed us that a true legacy isn't found in portraits on the wall or titles of power, but in the way we treat each other, through love that rises above every difference. And you? What kind of legacy do you believe we should leave behind for the next generation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story so we can spread kindness together. Because when we change the way we see others, we can change the whole world.